This is it, Brent. This is the test of 2024. This is the test that performance enthusiasts and us look forward to every season. And honestly, it's one of the prime reasons that we chose the M2 as our dedicated performance tire test platform. It's Extreme Performance Summer, and we have 6 of the highest performing tires on the market, and we're gonna compare them head to head. Now, Extreme Performance Summer tires are the 200-ish treadwear tires that are true street tires, but their whole reason for being is to develop the maximum dry traction for track use and autocross competition.
Right.
And in developing that extreme performance, they tend to give things up along the way. Primarily wet traction, mostly hydroplaning resistance, on-road comfort, and longevity.
Along with some of the biggest names in the EP tire game, we're also going to throw in one of the biggest names in the max performance summer tire category, the Michelin Pilot Sport 4S.
Right, and we should get it out of the way right up front. Tire Rack doesn't recommend the Pilot Sport 4S for dedicated track use.
No, and in fact, we don't recommend any max performance summer tire for track use.
Right, MP tires in general just aren't built to withstand the constant abuse, the vigors, the rigors of dedicated track use. But we know people do it.
Yes, they do.
So we decided to find out what you give and what you give up, or what you get and what you give up, by choosing the right tire for track use or the right tire for just performance, everyday sporty driving.
Yeah, and speaking of everyday driving, road rides are the first component to our test protocol, so let's get after it and do some road rides.
Agreed.
Bridgestone Potenza RE71 RS. First thing you notice, the ride. It's firm. It's firm bordering on stiff. Actually, it's stiff bordering on harsh. You feel every little undulation, every little bump. But that being said,
it's concise. This is an extreme performance summer tire. It's gonna be stiff, we know that. We're not saying it shouldn't be stiff. This is fine.
In addition to being stiff, it's also loud.
It is loud. Multiple different tones. They do kind of blend into a somewhat singular tone on the coarser stuff. Yeah, but the noise floor is high. It's a loud tire. Again, it's EP.
And now we're on the on-ramp. This is where Extreme Performance Summer tires, this is where the stiff ride and the loud tread pattern all is forgiven, right? As soon as you add any steering input, because man, they are so good. My catchphrase is, it's millimeter precise. You know, you can meter out exactly as much steering response as you want. I love it. Falcon Zenith RT660. It feels like it's trying to beat the road into submission.
Yes, this is just like, nope, you're gonna jump this, and I'm not gonna yield to this bump. It's gonna yield to me.
Right, it thinks it's going to win in the conflict between the pavement and the tire, and it doesn't. It just ends up being stiff and a little bit jumpy. It feels like it's moving around a little bit underneath you. It's not to the point that you have to correct it with steering inputs, but it just never really feels super planted, right? What do you think about noise quality?
More variety of tones on certain surfaces.
I would say all surfaces.
Yeah.
Let's talk about steering. It's very quick. You know, it's kind of what we describe as digital. It doesn't really build up a lot of effort in a progressive way or response in a progressive way. It's just kind of point and shoot, and you're there, right? Kumo X to V730.
The ride is pretty darn good. It's not comfortable per se, but it does do almost a decent job of rounding over that final bit of bump. What do you think about noise, TJ?
Also pretty decent.
So yes, it does create some tones on the coarser stuff. On the smoother pavement though, it actually just kind of settles down a little bit. It's pretty darn good. And again, we're comparing it to a max performance summer tire. It's sometimes better on smooth pavement than that tire, which is very impressive.
Another very impressive thing is the steering. It's very fast to respond. It's digital as opposed to progressive or analog. You know, you don't feel a whole lot of buildup. It's not quite as quick as the quickest tires, and it's not quite as intuitive and natural feeling as the best in that regard. So it's near the top, not necessarily at the top, but it's still really nice and feels really athletic on the road.
All right, and now into the Nankang Sportnex CRS. Another pretty comfortable extreme performance summer tire. The old school EP tires, I mean, they would just shake your teeth. Designers didn't care.
Right.
But now it's like, hey, we've kind of expanded our circle of development, our string, if you will.
And on that note,
noise. In general, it just creates a, medium to high volume sort of broad overall tone.
Steering is a little bit of a miss for me personally. Once you do kind of find the beginning of the response rate, it responds quickly. But that kind of vagueness makes things feel a little bit wonky, for lack of technical terms.
I 100% agree with your technical assessment that it is a little wonky because it's a little loose, a little vague on center, and then once it starts to load up, then it's really responsive and weighty.
Back on the road in the Yokohama Advent AO52. All right, let's get it out of the way right now.
Okay, I'm ready.
What the heck? This is comfortable.
There are imperfections on our route that you feel yourself bracing for, and then it's like they didn't even happen. Like, surprising, very surprising. Noise is in a similar boat, and also it doesn't have any of those weird artifacts or things distinctive, characteristics that really stand out like a lot of the other tires in the category do.
Those are things that bug me personally. So the fact that this is just like, yeah, I'm a little loud, but I'm consistent, I love that. Take my money.
Right? It seems like there is maybe a little bit of a trade-off here, and that's in the form of steering, right?
It's responsive, it's fast. Yes, again, it's still an EP tire, but could use a little more response. It's
right. It's a little vague, a little loose. It's just not as great as some of the others in the test. This is the Yokohama Advan Niova AD09. It's stiff. The ride is a bit choppy. It's like the rebound is turned way up, and initial impacts are pretty hard, but then there's this like abrupt recovery.
It feels more like a traditional performance tire, and that's not necessarily a good thing. It's kind of noisy too. We should clarify, that's okay. This is extreme performance. People aren't going to write this tire off because it's a little noisy, a little stiff. Yeah, it's EP, because what this tire does have is fantastic steering.
It has nice on-center feel, this good sense of straight ahead. It changes direction very, very quickly, but it doesn't feel digital or abrupt. Yeah. It's like, it's really quick to get from point A to point B, but if you wanted to meter out, small, minute changes anywhere in between, it's going to do that for you as well.
All right, we're back out again in the Michelin Pilot Sport 4S. This is the Max Performance summer tire that we're testing alongside all the Extreme Performance summer tires. And right off the bat, the ride is pretty good.
Right, it's more composed, it's more refined than basically any other tire in this test, and it should be, because Max Performance summer tires should have that extra level of refinement because they don't sacrifice it for the dry traction that the Extreme Performance summer tires really strive for. In terms of pure outright comfort, we'll call it, and that'll be all encompassing. It's not a huge change.
Yeah.
And here on the bypass on our 65-mile-an-hour stretch, what do you think about the sound?
Again, it's well below most of the Extreme Performance tires out here, but again, not far off. It can be noisy at times. On the very smooth stuff, we found it was pretty quiet.
And tell me about steering. You're driving.
Yeah.
How does it steer?
The steering is great. Sometimes, especially after driving some of the Extreme Performance tires, you want a little more of that heft. But again, especially for a Max Performance tire, this steering is very good. Excellent, dare I say. In our 50-0 wet braking and lateral traction testing, the Pilot Sport 4S was clearly the dominant tire in the group. It brought the car to a stop 7 feet shorter than the next closest tire, and an incredible 36 feet shorter than the longest in the test. The Advan AO52 and Potenza RE71RS were somewhat tightly grouped to step back from the Michelin, with the Advan Niova AD09 and Azenis RT660 another jump from there. Trailing by a considerable amount, the Exta V730 and Sportnext CRS struggled in the wet, delivering marginal traction even for the Extreme Performance summer category.
Wet lap times mostly followed the same pattern as our braking and skid pad testing, with the Michelin setting the fastest average lap by almost 3/4 of a second.
This is the Michelin Pilot Sport 4S, and as we've hit on before, it's the only Max Performance summer tire in the test, so it has more void area, generally more street focused than track focused. It has the best traction in the test. We're not dealing with hydroplaning situations the way that we do with the Extreme Performance summer tires. So it's good in that regard, but it's not the nicest tire to drive, right?
It just doesn't have those lapping chops of the other extreme performance summer tires.
It does any one thing very, very well, but combining those things is where it really struggles. You know, it doesn't feel like a track tire. It feels like a very strong, objective traction tire.
The Bridgestone and Yokohama Advan AO52 were next, but this time the Bridgestone had the advantage, with laps that were half a second faster on average.
I love the steering. Even in the wet, it is so direct, so immediate, it just points the front end wherever you want it to go. The grip, when the surface is just wet, is phenomenal.
It does hydroplane a little bit in certain spots at certain speeds. It doesn't really ruin your lap, it's just some weird feedback from the tire.
This is the Yokohama Advan AO52. It's nice to drive. It has good grip.
Yeah, I mean, it had the objective grip out here. It turns out it handles pretty well under kind of dynamic loads too. We get a little bit of hydroplaning here and there, but it's not that typical on-off switch that we've experienced with some tires. It's more progressive. It's more easy to kind of work with.
The Falcon was a third of a second back from there, which was another half second ahead of the other Yokohama, the Advan Neova AD09.
All right, on track with the Falcon Azenis RT660. Right off the bat, I just want to say how nicely balanced and fun this tire is to drive. It is a sweetheart. Grip is probably okay for this group.
Right. Through the slalom, the front end points really nicely. It doesn't have the, as much of the abrupt hydroplaning on the front axle as what some of the other strong traction tires do.
Yeah.
I will say the one caveat is the rear end steps out a little bit abruptly.
All right, out here in the Yokohama Advan Neova AD09. If we're talking about wet traction right now, I can tell you it's lower than the AO52.
I'd say it's lower than most of the tires in this test.
It is lower than most. It struggles with some of like the big inputs, hard braking. You can tell you just don't have as much traction.
It communicates with you. It tells you exactly what it's capable of. All of its traits, even though they're at a lower outright level, everything's in proportion, which makes it, again, really easy to drive. It's just, it's not fast, and it's kind of disappointing because it is so enjoyable that you wish you had more grip to work with. You wish you were putting down faster lap times, but it just won't do it. It just doesn't have the grip to do it.
Not surprisingly, the Exta V730 and Sportnext CRS were competing for the slowest laps, with the Nankang ultimately rounding out the group due to having the lowest outright traction.
This is the Kumo Exta V730, and right here through the slalom is a good place to kind of illustrate small inputs. When you don't have too much speed or when it's not like a 90-degree turn, the front end feels really, really pointy. It has good authority, it changes direction, and it's really precise. It feels so good in those kinds of scenarios. But then what, Brent? Why don't you take it from there?
Kind of like back there on the faster, sweeping, kind of higher speed corners, it kind of falls on its face.
Right?
It could be the massive outboard element is hydroplane, even on our, dare I say, damp-ish track, not even high water track here.
Right.
But yeah, it just pushes gently and unfortunately quickly into understeer. Out in the Nankang Sportnext CRS, and this is as good a time as any as I'm understeering through this high-speed corner. Shifting to third, and now we fall on our face. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm back. It just goes right to either we'll oversteer and then straight back into understeer.
I would say it's actually a little bit worse than the Kumo. They feel very similar, but the Nankang has lower outright traction to work with.
It comes as little surprise that the Extreme Performance summer tires dominated the dry portion of our testing, since dry traction is their primary performance target. In sustained cornering traction, the Sportnext CRS delivered the highest lateral grip at 1.07 Gs, followed closely by the Advan AO52 and the Azenis RT660. The Potenza RE71RS and Exta V730 both posted 1.04 Gs. and the Advan-Nova AD09 was capable of 1.03. The Pilot Sport 4S rounded out the group, generating 1G of traction, which is still very respectable for a pure street tire. The results for braking were very close, with only 6.4 feet separating the best in test Advan AO52 from its sibling, the Advan-Nova AD09, which required the longest stopping distance in the test at a still impressive 75.8 feet. Less than 2 feet separated the Bridgestone, Nankang, Michelin, and Falcon, and the Kuma's braking distances were just outside of that group at 74.4 feet.
For any extreme performance summer tire test, the dry lap times are arguably the most important metric in the whole test. In our results, the top 4 tires were very close to one another. It's important for us to point out that any one of these tires could likely be the fastest option, based on your driving style, vehicle setup, or the surface you're racing on. But in our testing, on our car, on our track, the Advan AO52 took the win.
I'll just sit over here and be bitter that I'm in the passenger seat. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
It's a great tire to drive because of its grip. It's also a great tire to drive because of its balance. It actually does communicate a little more to you than some of the other high grip EP tires we've driven, which is an absolute welcome trait.
Bravo, Yokohama on this one.
Yeah, a lot of people may have fast forwarded to this point, go back, watch the whole thing. But if you want to know the fastest tire out here today in the dry, it's the Yokohama.
Followed closely by the Potenza RE71RS and the Azenis RT660, and then the Sportneck CRS.
This is the Bridgestone Potenza RE71RS.
We're getting paid right now to do this. This is pretty cool.
Yes, this is what this tire was made for. It is so good, Brent. The steering, the traction, the just overall balance of the car. I love it.
You're right. It's the overall balance that makes this tire what it is. It doesn't over-index or frankly under-index into anything. It's just good at everything and just lays it right out there. It's easy to drive hard.
Falcon Azenis RT660. Man, the first thing you notice when you're driving this tire is the steering is just so immediate, so direct. You just think about where you want to go and you've been there for a half a second already.
And it's not just the steering, the whole experience is a little more free. It's a little more on its toes, which is nice. In the Nankang Sportneck CRS, the steering is good.
Yes.
It's just not as good as some of the other tires we've tested.
It doesn't have as much soul. It doesn't have as much feel. It's just very digital and takes you from where you are to where you want to be quickly, but you don't enjoy the ride, right?
The traction though, I don't want to say it makes up for it, but man, it makes up for it. It is just stupid sticky. Once you get it on its shoulder, it takes a set, it can turn the world. It's Superman.
The Exta V730 was 2 to 3 tenths behind the lead group, with the endurance-focused Advan-Nova AD09 trailing further still.
Kumo Exta V730. We know that it's consistent over long periods of time, or consistently fast over long periods of time. But all that being said, it didn't bear that out in our track testing, right?
No. It also seemed to kind of get unhappy quickly with us. The first couple laps were good.
Right. I drove the first 2 laps and it was crisp, it was planted, it rotated just a little bit, it was nice.
And then it kind of bombed pretty hard after that. It was still good, but we didn't experience that with a lot of tires we tested.
The Yokohama Advan-Nova AD09. And this one is another endurance-focused tire. It's designed to be fast and consistent for a long time.
It's not super happy, similar to the Kumo. It's not very happy doing this lap after lap after lap.
Yes. The first couple laps, which I drove, it was, pretty crisp, nice steering response.
You got the good one. It was like, here, now you take it.
And then, man, just the more we drove it, just the more unstable it got, the more just kind of imprecise it got. It just, the rear end wanted to step out. Pretty big evolution, pretty big fall off from beginning to end.
The Pilot Sport 4S was outmatched before we started, so it's no surprise that its 28.35 second average lap time was a full second behind the test-leading Yokohama.
kind of showing where it comes from a little bit.
Right.
I mean, it's good within its limit. If you stay in its MP zone, it's fine. It's great even. But once you try to do the things that we've been doing with the extreme performance tires, it's like, no, I don't do, no.
This is not what we would recommend doing with a max performance summer tire. And we say that a lot, that, you know, if you are going to drive on the track with any kind of regularity, use an extreme performance summer tire or higher performance category. But if you start pushing it, trying to be as fast in this as you would be in an extreme performance summer tire, hey, it's not gonna do it. And B, you're probably gonna chew the thing to pieces.
Then you're gonna email Tire Rack, why do my tires look like this?
Right, of course, that's the inevitable next step.
When the scores were tallied, the Yokohama Advan AO52 was at the top of the chart, and it's not hard to see why. On the dry track, it set the fastest average lap time and tied for the highest subjective score. It also tied for the top marks on the road and was strong in the wet. The Michelin Pilot Sport 4S was the other half of the tie at the top of the road ride charts, and it led every objective metric in our wet testing. It fell to the back in dry traction and lap times, which wasn't surprising from the only max performance summer tire in the test. Bridgestone's Potenza RE71 RS rounds out the top 3 in the test, delivering impressive dry and wet traction and lap times that were near the best in both conditions. Its mid-pack on-road score ultimately prevented it from finishing higher on the podium.
The remaining tires in the test weren't far behind, but each was held back in one way or another. The Nankang Sport Next CRS was one of the top tires in the dry and on the road, but its abysmal wet performance was at the bottom of the group. The Falcon Azenis RT660 was one of the best in the dry and decent in the wet, but it was last on the road. Kumo's Exta V730 satisfied on the road and was just decent on track, and the endurance-focused Yokohama Advan Nova AD09 didn't excel in any way in our testing.
Okay, so we've finished the on-road, the wet, and the dry portions of our testing, right? But we're not done yet.
Not even close.
The next step is our full track test. So we're gonna take every spec from this test up to our favorite road course in Southwest Michigan, and we'll see how they perform at higher speeds and with longer turns.
And that's arguably the most important piece of the puzzle for these EP tires, and its own separate video. So be sure to click on the link and check it out.